She was fixing her cabin wrecked by outlaws, alone in the Texas wilderness, until a Comanche warrior rode in with an axe in hand, saying nothing but 3 words that would change everything. The Texas hill country stretched wide and unforgiving under a pale autumn sky, the kind of sky that promised cold nights and harder days ahead. Wind swept through the valleys, carrying the scent of cedar and dust, rustling the dry grasses that bent and swayed like waves on a forgotten sea. In the distance, the hills rose in layers of purple and grey, ancient and indifferent to the struggles of those who dared to call this land home. It was beautiful in a harsh way, the kind of beauty that did not comfort but demanded respect. Lillian Voss stood in the ruins of what had once been her cabin, her home, her sanctuary. The structure leaned dangerously to one side, its roof caved in where the support beams had been shattered. Walls that had taken her late husband 2 summers to build now gaped open, splintered wood jutting out like broken bones. The door hung from a single hinge, swinging slowly in the wind with a creak that sounded almost like a moan. Shattered glass glittered in the dirt where the windows had been smashed. Furniture lay overturned and destroyed inside. Chairs broken into kindling, the tables split down the middle. Her grandmother's quilt torn and trampled into the mud. Lily stood with her hands on her hips, breath coming hard, eyes tracing the damage with a mixture of rage and despair. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose braid that had come half undone during the morning's work, strands sticking to her sweat-dampened face. Her dress, once a deep blue, was now stained with dirt and soot, the hem torn from catching on debris. Her hands were raw, blistered from hours of pulling away charred wood and lifting fallen beams. Blood seeped through a makeshift bandage wrapped around her left palm, where a nail had torn through the skin. 3 days ago, the outlaws had come. She had been in town, trading eggs and preserves for flour and salt, when she saw the smoke rising from the direction of her homestead. By the time she rode back, they were gone. The Fletcher gang, someone in town had said, a group of men who terrorized the territory, burning and stealing without mercy or reason. They had taken what little she had, her husband's rifle, the small stash of money hidden in a tin under the floorboards, even the livestock, 2 chickens and a goat that had been more pet than property. What they could not take they destroyed. Her husband, Daniel, had been dead for 8 months. Fever had taken him in the spring, swift and merciless, leaving Lily alone on land they had claimed together. The neighbors, few and far between, had offered brief condolences and little else. Women alone were not uncommon on the frontier, but they were not celebrated either. They were vulnerabilities, problems waiting to happen, and most people preferred to keep their distance rather than involve themselves in another's struggle. Lily had learned quickly that survival meant solitude, that asking for help was a currency she could not afford. She bent down and picked up a piece of charred wood, turning it over in her hands. The outlaws had set fire to the back corner of the cabin, but the rain 2 nights prior had kept it from spreading. Still, the damage was enough. The structure was unstable, uninhabitable. Winter was 6 weeks away, maybe less, and if she did not repair the cabin before the first freeze, she would have no choice but to abandon the land and return to town. To live on charity or worse, to remarry out of necessity rather than choice. That thought burned hotter than any fire the Fletcher gang had set. Lily had not survived Daniel's death, had not endured the whispers and sideways glances of the townspeople, had not fought through grief and loneliness and bone-deep exhaustion, only to give up now. This land was hers. This cabin, broken as it was hers, and she would rebuild it, even if it killed her. She spent the first day clearing debris. She dragged out the ruined furniture, piling it near the edge of the clearing to be burned later. She pulled down the sections of roof that were too damaged to salvage, careful to avoid the nails that jutted out like teeth. She swept out the ash and broken glass, her broom raising clouds of dust that made her cough and cover her mouth with a rag. By evening, her arms ached and her back screamed in protest, but the interior was clear, ready for the next phase. The work was harder than she had imagined. Each beam she lifted felt like it weighed twice what it should. Each board she pried loose seemed determined to stay attached, fighting her every inch of the way. Splinters dug into her fingers despite the worn gloves she wore, and more than once she had to stop and pull them out with her teeth, spitting blood and cursing under her breath. The physical pain was manageable, but the emotional weight was something else entirely. Every broken piece she removed was a reminder of what she had lost, not just the cabin, but the life she and Daniel had tried to build together. The second day, she assessed what she would need. Timber for the roof, planks for the walls, nails, rope, tar paper if she could afford it. She made a list in her mind, calculating costs she did not have, resources she did not possess. The nearest sawmill was a day's ride away, and even if she could afford the wood, she had no way to haul it back alone. She thought of the neighbors again, the Caldwell family 5 miles east, the Hendersons to the south, but pride and experience kept her from seeking them out. Help always came with conditions, with expectations, with a debt that would be called in later. Mrs. Caldwell had made that clear enough when Daniel died. She had come by with a basket of bread and preserves, her smile tight and her eyes assessing. "You know, dear," she had said, patting Lily's hand with a condescension that made her teeth grind, "a woman alone is a dangerous thing out here. My brother in Austin is a widower, a good man, steady income. I could write to him if you'd like." Lily had thanked her politely and never touched the bread, so she decided to do what she could with what she had. She walked the property, searching for fallen trees, branches thick enough to serve as beams. She found a few, dragged them back one by one, her boots sinking into the soft earth, her shoulders burning with effort. It was slow work, exhausting work, but it was hers. She marked each tree she cut with Daniel's old hunting knife, carving a small L into the bark, a claim of ownership that felt both defiant and desperate. The forest around her property was dense with oak and cedar, the ground carpeted with fallen leaves that rustled beneath her feet. Squirrels chattered overhead, and once she startled a deer that bounded away through the underbrush, white tail flashing. The beauty of the land was not lost on her, even in her exhaustion. This was why they had come here, why Daniel had convinced her to leave the relative safety of St. Louis and venture into the wilderness. "We'll build something that's ours," he had said, his eyes bright with dreams. "No landlords, no bosses, just us and the land." She had believed him then, believed in the dream enough to follow him into the unknown. On the third morning, as the sun broke over the hills and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Lily stood in front of the cabin with a saw in her hands. She had positioned one of the logs across 2 stumps, creating a makeshift workbench. The saw was old, its teeth dull, but it was all she had. She began to cut, the blade biting into the wood with a rhythmic rasp that echoed across the clearing. Sweat dripped into her eyes. Her arms trembled, but she did not stop. The sound became meditative in its repetition, a rhythm that kept her mind from wandering too far into despair. Push, pull, push, pull. The sawdust gathered at her feet, pale and fine. Her shoulders screamed in protest, but she gritted her teeth and kept going. She had measured twice, marked the wood with a piece of charcoal, and now she was committed to the cut. If she stopped, if she let doubt creep in, she might not start again. She did not notice the rider at first. He had come from the north, moving silently through the trees, his horse's hooves muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the line of pines, and watched. He sat motionless in the saddle, his dark eyes taking in the scene before him. The broken cabin, the woman working alone, the determination in every movement she made. Mukwaru had been tracking the Fletcher gang for 2 weeks. They had raided a Comanche camp near the Red River, killing an elder and stealing horses that did not belong to them. His people had asked him to find them, to bring back what was taken, to deliver justice in whatever form it required. He had followed their trail south, through the hill country, past abandoned homesteads and burnt-out wagons, the evidence of their cruelty scattered like breadcrumbs. The gang was moving toward the Mexican border. He knew that much, but they were careless, leaving signs even a child could follow. He had not expected to find this. A woman alone, rebuilding what had been destroyed. There was something in the way she moved, a stubbornness, a refusal to yield that reminded him of his sister, who had died in a raid 5 years prior. She had fought too, even when the fight was hopeless, even when surrender would have been easier. Takala had been her name. It meant corn tassel, and she had been gentle in all things except her will to survive. She had died protecting their mother, taking an arrow meant for someone else. Mukwuru watched for a long time, longer than he intended. He saw the way Lily's hands shook as she soared, the way she paused every few minutes to catch her breath, the way she wiped her face with the back of her arm, leaving streaks of dirt across her cheek. He saw the bandage on her hand, the blood seeping through, and he knew she would not last another week at this pace. The work was too much for one person, especially someone unaccustomed to the labor of building. He could see it in the uneven cuts, the inefficient movements, the way she fought against the wood instead of working with it. He could have ridden on. He should have ridden on. This was not his fight, not his responsibility. The Fletcher gang was still days ahead, and every moment he delayed was a moment they gained distance. But something held him there, rooted him to the spot, something deeper than duty or revenge. Perhaps it was the memory of his sister. Perhaps it was the knowledge that survival on this land required more than just will. It required help, even when that help came from unexpected places. Or perhaps it was something simpler, a recognition of another soul fighting against impossible odds, refusing to break. He nudged his horse forward, out of the trees and into the clearing. The sound of hooves on hard ground broke the rhythm of Lily's saw. She stopped mid-stroke, her head snapping up, eyes wide. Her hand moved instinctively to her side, where a knife was sheathed against her belt. She straightened, shoulders squared, ready to fight or run, whichever became necessary first. Mukwuru stopped his horse 20 feet away. He did not dismount. He did not speak. He simply sat there, his presence filling the space between them, like a question waiting to be answered. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his long black hair tied back with a strip of leather. He wore buckskin pants and a simple shirt, a knife at his belt, a rifle slung across his back. His face was weathered, lined with the kind of age that came from hardship rather than years. But his eyes were sharp, clear and steady. Lily's heart pounded in her chest. She had heard stories about the Comanche, stories that painted them as ghosts of the plains, warriors who could disappear into the landscape and reappear without warning. Stories that said they were dangerous, unpredictable, enemies of settlers and soldiers alike. But she had also heard other stories, quieter ones, about honor and respect, about a people who valued courage and despised cowardice. Daniel had told her once that the Comanche respected strength, that they had no patience for weakness or deception. "If you ever meet one," he had said half-jokingly, "look them in the eye. They'll respect that, even if they don't like you." She did not reach for her knife. She did not run. She stood her ground, chin lifted, eyes meeting his without flinching. If he meant her harm, running would not save her. And if he did not, then fear would only insult them both. Her pulse hammered in her ears, but she kept her breathing steady, kept her gaze locked on his. For a long moment, neither moved. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine and earth, rustling the leaves in the trees. A hawk cried somewhere overhead, its call sharp and distant. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the clearing. Time seemed to stretch, each second feeling like an hour, and Lily felt as though she were being measured, weighed, judged by those dark, unreadable eyes. Then Mukwuru spoke, his voice low, rough but clear. "Let me help." 3 words, simple, direct, no explanation, no justification. Just an offer that hung in the air between them like smoke. Lily blinked, her mind struggling to process what she had just heard. She stared at him, searching his face for deception, for mockery, for anything that might explain why a Comanche warrior would ride onto her property and offer assistance. His expression remained neutral, patient, as if he had all the time in the world to wait for her answer. Why? she asked, her voice hoarse from disuse and dust. It was the only question that mattered. Mukwuru's expression did not change. He glanced at the cabin, at the broken walls and shattered roof, at the pile of debris she had cleared, at the logs she had dragged from the forest. His gaze swept over the clearing with the practiced eye of someone who understood labor, who could assess the scope of work with a single look. Then his eyes returned to hers. "Because you need it," he said simply, and there was no pity in his voice, no condescension, only a statement of fact. Lily's throat tightened. She wanted to refuse, to tell him she could manage on her own, that she did not need anyone, least of all a stranger whose people were supposed to be her enemies. But the words stuck in her throat because they were not true. She did need help. She needed it desperately. And pride, she was learning, was a luxury she could no longer afford. Winter would not wait for her stubbornness, and the cabin would not repair itself through force of will alone. She looked at him for a long moment, weighing the risk against the necessity, the fear against the hope. His presence was steady, unhurried, as if he understood that trust could not be rushed. There was something in his stillness that calmed her, something that spoke of patience and purpose rather than threat. She thought of Daniel, of how he had always said that actions revealed character more than words ever could. This man had not threatened her, had not demanded anything, had simply offered help when she needed it most. Then slowly she nodded. "All right," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I don't have money to pay you." Mukwuru dismounted in one smooth motion, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. He walked to the back of his horse and untied a bundle strapped to the saddle, an axe, its blade sharp and gleaming in the morning light. The handle was worn smooth from years of use, the wood dark with age and oil. He turned to face her, the axe resting easily in his hand as if it were an extension of his arm. "I don't want money," he said, and then he walked past her toward the cabin. His steps purposeful, his presence solid and real. Lily stood frozen for a moment, watching him, her mind spinning with questions she did not know how to ask. Who was he really? Why was he here? What did he want, if not payment? But the questions seemed less important than the immediate reality. He was here, he was willing to help, and she needed that help more than she needed answers. She picked up her saw, took a deep breath, and followed him into the ruins of her home. The first hour they worked together passed in complete silence, broken only by the sound of tools biting into wood and the occasional creak of damaged timber being shifted. Mukwuru moved with an efficiency that spoke of years spent building and repairing, his movements economical and precise. He did not waste motion, did not second-guess himself, simply assessed what needed to be done, and did it. Lily watched him from the corner of her eye as she continued her own work, noting the way he tested each beam before applying pressure, the way he measured twice before making a single cut. He had begun by examining the structural integrity of what remained standing. He walked around the perimeter of the cabin, running his hands along the support posts, pressing his weight against walls to test their strength, checking the foundation stones that had shifted during the attack. His face remained impassive, revealing nothing of his thoughts, but Lily could see the assessment happening behind those dark eyes. After several minutes of inspection, he returned to where she stood and pointed to the northeast corner where the roof had collapsed most severely. "Here first," he said, his words sparse but clear. "If we do not fix this, the next rain will destroy what is left." Lily nodded, grateful that he seemed to understand the urgency without her having to explain it. She had been so focused on clearing debris and gathering materials that she had not properly prioritized the actual repairs. The idea of someone else taking charge, even partially, felt strange after so many months of making every decision alone. But there was relief in it too, a lessening of the crushing weight that had settled on her shoulders since Daniel's death. Together, they began the work of dismantling the damaged section completely. Mukwuru climbed onto what remained of the roof with a sureness that made Lily nervous, his feet finding purchase on beams that looked ready to give way at any moment. He worked from above, while she worked from below, him lowering the ruined timber carefully, while she guided it to the ground. It was dangerous work. One wrong move could send him crashing through the weakened structure. But he never hesitated, never showed fear. "You have done this before," Lily said after they had cleared the worst of the damage. It was not quite a question, but not quite a statement either. Mukwuru paused in his work, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. He looked at her for a moment, as if deciding whether to answer, then nodded slowly. "I helped build many lodges when I was young," he said, his English accented but perfectly understandable. "And I have repaired many things that white men destroyed." There was no bitterness in his voice, just a simple statement of fact. But Lily felt the weight of it nonetheless. She thought of the stories she had heard, of cavalry raids on peaceful camps, of treaties broken before the ink had dried, of a people pushed further and further from their ancestral lands. She wanted to say something, to apologize perhaps, but the words seemed inadequate, hollow. So instead she simply nodded and returned to her work. By midday, the sun had climbed high and hot, unusual for late autumn but not unheard of in Texas. Lily's dress clung to her back with sweat, and her arms ached from the constant lifting and hauling. She straightened up, pressing one hand to the small of her back, and realized she had not eaten since the previous evening. Her stomach growled audibly, and she felt a flush of embarrassment. Mukwuru had also paused in his work, standing in the shade of a nearby oak tree, his eyes scanning the horizon with a watchfulness that never seemed to cease. Lily wondered what he was looking for, whether he expected trouble, whether he was regretting his decision to stop and help. She cleared her throat awkwardly. "I can make some food," she offered. "It is not much, just cornbread and some dried meat, but you are welcome to share it." He turned to look at her, and for the first time she saw something that might have been the ghost of a smile touch his lips, so brief she almost missed it. "That would be good," he said simply. Lily had set up a temporary camp near the cabin, a small fire ring with a pot and a few supplies she had salvaged or brought from town. She built up the fire, coaxing flames from the embers she had kept burning overnight, and set water to boil for coffee. The cornbread she had made the previous day was still edible, if a bit dry, and she sliced it into thick pieces. The dried venison was tough and salty but filling, and she laid out portions on 2 tin plates she had managed to save from the destruction. They sat on opposite sides of the fire, not quite comfortable with each other, but not quite uncomfortable either, existing in that strange space between strangers and something else. Mukwuru ate slowly, methodically, his eyes continuing to sweep the clearing even as he chewed. Lily found herself studying him more openly now, taking in details she had been too startled to notice before. There were scars on his hands, old ones that had healed into white lines against his copper skin. A newer scar ran along his jawline, barely visible beneath the shadow of stubble. He looked to be perhaps 35, maybe 40, though it was hard to tell. "The men who did this," Mukwuru said suddenly, breaking the silence. "They wore blue bandanas, rode painted horses." Lily's head snapped up, her eyes widening in surprise. "Yes," she said, her voice tight. "The Fletcher gang. They have been terrorizing homesteads all through the hill country. How did you know?" "I have been tracking them," he said, his expression darkening. "They raided my people 2 weeks ago, killed an elder, stole horses. I was sent to bring back what was taken and to make them pay for what they did." Lily felt a chill run through her despite the warmth of the fire. She had known the Fletcher gang was dangerous. Everyone in the territory knew that. But hearing that they had killed someone, that they were being actively hunted, made the threat feel more immediate, more real. She thought of how close she had come to being here when they arrived, how different things might have been if her errand to town had been delayed by even an hour. "Are they still in the area?" she asked, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. Mukwuru shook his head. are moving south toward the border, but they are careless. They leave signs. I will find them." There was certainty in his voice, a cold determination that made Lily believe him. "But not today. Today I help you. Tomorrow I continue the hunt." "Why?" Lily asked, the question bursting out before she could stop it. "Why help me when you have your own mission, your own people to think about?" Mukwuru was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire, as if the flames held answers he was searching for. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer, more reflective than she had heard it before. "My sister died 5 years ago," he said. "She was killed in a raid, trying to protect our mother. She fought even when there was no hope of winning, even when surrender would have saved her life." He paused, his jaw tightening. "When I see you here, fighting to save what is yours, refusing to give up even when you are alone, I see her. I see that same strength, that same refusal to break. And I think if someone had helped her, if someone had been there, maybe she would still be alive." Lily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, and she blinked them back fiercely. She understood loss, understood the way it could hollow you out and leave you walking through the world like a ghost. She understood the guilt of survival, the constant questioning of what might have been different if only, if only, if only. I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for your sister, for your loss." Mukwuru nodded, accepting her words without comment. They finished their meal in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now, one born of shared understanding rather than mutual wariness. When they returned to work, there was an ease between them that had not existed before, a sense of partnership that went beyond the simple exchange of labor. The afternoons stretched long and hot as they worked to frame out the new roof section. Mukwuru had found additional timber in the woods that Lily had missed, trees that had fallen naturally and seasoned enough to be usable. He showed her how to strip the bark efficiently, how to judge whether wood was sound or rotted at the core, how to cut joints that would fit together tightly without the need for excessive nails, which were expensive and in short supply. Lily absorbed the lessons eagerly, her hands learning what her mind struggled to hold. As they lifted a particularly heavy beam into place, their hands brushed, and Lily felt an unexpected jolt at the contact. She pulled back instinctively, and Mukwuru did the same, both of them suddenly aware of the intimacy of their proximity. They secured the beam in silence, neither acknowledging what had passed between them, but Lily found herself hyper-aware of his presence afterward, the sound of his breathing, the smell of wood smoke and leather that clung to his clothes, the way his shadow fell across hers as the sun shifted westward. By late afternoon, they had made remarkable progress. The corner that had been completely destroyed now had a framework in place, rough but solid, ready for the planking that would come next. Lily stood back and surveyed their work with a sense of accomplishment she had not felt in months. What had seemed impossible that morning now looked achievable, difficult certainly, but no longer hopeless. "You are a good worker," Mukwuru said, and though his tone was matter-of-fact, Lily heard the compliment in it. "I had a good teacher." "Today," she replied, allowing herself a small smile. As the sun began its descent toward the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Mukwuru began gathering his tools. Lily felt a sudden panic rise in her chest, a fear that once he left he would not return, that this unexpected help would vanish as suddenly as it had appeared. "Will you?" she started, then stopped, unsure how to finish the question without sounding desperate. Mukwuru paused, looking at her with those dark, knowing eyes. "I will return tomorrow at first light," he said, answering the question she had not quite asked. "There is still much work to do." Relief flooded through her, so intense it was almost painful. "Thank you," she said, and meant it more than she had ever meant anything. He nodded once, then swung himself up onto his horse with practiced ease. He sat there for a moment, silhouetted against the darkening sky, a figure that seemed to exist between two worlds, belonging fully to neither, but moving through both with equal grace. "Lock your door tonight," he said, his voice carrying a warning. "The Fletcher gang may be moving south, but this land is not safe for a woman alone. Keep your knife close." Then he was gone, disappearing into the trees as silently as he had arrived, leaving Lily standing in the clearing with the taste of gratitude and something else, something she was not quite ready to name, sharp on her tongue. That night, alone in the partially repaired cabin with the fire burning low and the wind whispering through the gaps in the walls, Lily lay on her bedroll and stared up at the stars visible through the damaged roof. She thought about Mukwuru, about his sister, about the Fletcher gang, and the complicated web of violence and retribution that connected them all. She thought about the way his hands had moved with such certainty over the wood, the way he had known exactly what to do without hesitation, the way he had looked at her with something that might have been respect. For the first time since Daniel's death, since the outlaws had destroyed her home, since the terrible grinding weight of solitude had settled over her like a shroud, Lily felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It was small, fragile, easily crushed, but unmistakable nonetheless. It was hope. She pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders, one hand resting on the knife sheathed at her belt, as Mukwuru had advised, and let her eyes drift closed. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more of the constant struggle that defined frontier life. But tomorrow would also bring Mukwuru, and for now, in this moment, that was enough. The wind picked up outside, carrying with it the scent of coming rain and the distant cry of a coyote. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called out, its voice lonely and haunting. But inside the cabin, beneath the makeshift repairs and surrounded by the evidence of destruction and rebuilding, Lily Voss slept more soundly than she had in months, dreaming of walls that stood straight and strong, of roofs that did not leak, of a future that might, against all odds, still be possible. True to his word, Mukwuru arrived just as the first light of dawn broke over the eastern hills, the sky still streaked with pink and gold. Lily had been awake for over an hour, stoking the fire and boiling water for coffee, her body stiff and sore from the previous day's labor, but her spirits unexpectedly lifted. She heard his horse before she saw him, the soft rhythm of hooves on packed earth, and she straightened from where she had been arranging tools, brushing dust from her skirt in a gesture that felt absurdly domestic given the circumstances. He dismounted without greeting, merely nodded in her direction, and immediately set about assessing where they had left off the day before. There was something comforting in his silence, in the way he simply arrived and began working without need for pleasantries or small talk. It reminded Lily of Daniel in some ways, though her husband had been more prone to whistling while he worked, filling the air with off-key melodies that had driven her to both laughter and distraction. They worked through the morning with growing synchronicity, their movements beginning to anticipate each other's needs. When Lily reached for a hammer, Mukwuru was already handing her nails. When he needed leverage to lift a beam, she was there to brace the other end without being asked. The cabin began to take shape around them, walls growing more solid, gaps being filled, the skeleton of destruction being clothed once more in the flesh of habitable shelter. By mid-morning, they had completed the roof framework over the damaged section and had begun the tedious work of splitting shingles from cedar logs. Mukwuru showed her the technique, how to read the grain of the wood, where to place the froe and mallet to achieve clean splits. Lily's first attempts were clumsy, the wood splintering unevenly or refusing to separate at all. But gradually she found the rhythm, the satisfying crack as the wood gave way along its natural seams. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. You learn quickly, Mukwuru observed, pausing to wipe his brow. I have had to, Lily replied. Not bitterly, but a simple fact. When there is no one else, you learn or you fail. He nodded, understanding implicit in the gesture. They continued working, the pile of shingles growing steadily when the sound of approaching horses broke their concentration. Lily's head snapped up, her hand instinctively moving toward her knife. Mukwuru was already on his feet, his body language shifting subtly into something more alert, more dangerous. 3 riders emerged from the tree line, moving at an easy trot. Lily recognized them immediately. Samuel Hartwick and his 2 sons, Thomas and James. The Hartwicks owned a large ranch about 8 miles south, and Samuel served as a self-appointed spokesman for the scattered community of settlers in the region. He was a broad man in his 50s, with a grey beard and eyes that missed very little. His sons were younger versions of their father, sturdy and serious, carrying themselves with the confidence of men who had never known real want. Samuel reined in his horse at the edge of the clearing, his eyes moving from Lily to Mukwuru and back again. His expression was carefully neutral, but Lily could see the questions forming behind his gaze, the calculations being made. Thomas and James flanked their father, their hands resting casually near the rifles strapped to their saddles. "Mrs. Voss," Samuel said, touching the brim of his hat in greeting, "we heard about the trouble you had with the Fletcher gang. Came by to see if you needed assistance." "That is kind of you, Mr. Hartwick," Lily replied, keeping her voice steady. "As you can see, I am managing the repairs." Samuel's eyes moved pointedly to Mukwuru, who stood silent and still, his face revealing nothing. "So I see," Samuel said slowly. "Did not realize you had hired help, ma'am. These are dangerous times to be inviting strangers onto your property, especially strangers of certain affiliations." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Lily felt anger flare hot in her chest, but she forced herself to speak calmly. "Mr. Mukwuru has been invaluable in helping me restore my home," she said, emphasizing his name deliberately. "I would still be clearing debris if not for his assistance. He has asked for nothing in return and has conducted himself with nothing but honor." Thomas Hartwick shifted in his saddle, his young face twisted with poorly concealed hostility. "Honor," he repeated with a snort. "Pa! You cannot be serious about letting her harbor a Comanche. You know what they have done, what they are capable of." "I know what I have seen with my own eyes," Lily said sharply, her patience fraying. "And what I have seen is a man who offered help when I needed it, which is more than I can say for most of my so-called neighbors." The words came out harsher than she intended, and she saw Samuel's expression harden. James, the younger son, spoke up for the first time. "We are just concerned for your safety, Mrs. Voss. A woman alone. It is not proper. People will talk." "People already talk," Lily shot back. "They talked when my husband died. They talked when I decided to stay on this land alone. They will talk no matter what I do. So I might as well do what serves my survival rather than their gossip." Mukwuru had not moved or spoken during this exchange, but Lily could feel the tension radiating from him, coiled energy waiting to be released if necessary. Samuel seemed to sense it too, his hand moving almost imperceptibly away from his belt. "We mean no offense," Samuel said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "We are simply looking out for the community. These are troubled times, and we all need to be careful about the company we keep. There are those in town who will not look kindly on this arrangement." "Then they need not look," Lily said firmly. "This is my land, my home, and I will accept help from whomever offers it in good faith, if that troubles anyone. They are welcome to come speak to me directly rather than sending delegations." Samuel's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "As you wish, Mrs. Voss, but do not say you were not warned when consequences come calling." He wheeled his horse around, his sons following suit, and the 3 of them rode off at a canter, dust rising in their wake. Lily stood watching them go, her heart pounding with anger and something that felt uncomfortably like fear. She had made an enemy today, or at least confirmed existing suspicions that would spread through the community like wildfire. When she finally turned back to Mukwuru, she found him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "You did not have to defend me," he said quietly. Yes, I did, Lily replied, surprised by the vehemence in her own voice. And you have done nothing to deserve their suspicion. Their hatred is based on ignorance and fear, not on anything you have actually done. Their hatred is based on history, Mukwuru corrected gently, on years of conflict and bloodshed on both sides. I do not blame them for their fear, even if I do not accept their judgment. Well, I do not accept it either, Lily said stubbornly, and I will not let them drive away the one person who has actually helped me. Something shifted in Mukwuru's expression, a softening around the eyes that might have been gratitude or respect or something else entirely. You may regret that stance, he said. Standing with me will cost you these people. They will make you pay for choosing an outsider over their approval. Let them try, Lily said and meant it. They returned to work. But the easy rhythm of the morning had been disrupted. Lily found herself glancing toward the tree line repeatedly, half expecting to see more riders, more confrontations. Mukwuru noticed her distraction and finally stopped working, setting down his tools. You should go to town, he said. Get the supplies you need while you still can. After today, they may refuse to sell to you. Lily wanted to argue, to insist that no one would dare cut her off from necessary goods, but she knew he was probably right. Small communities had long memories and powerful tools of social enforcement. Ostracism was as effective as any physical barrier. Will you be all right here alone? She asked. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I have been alone most of my life. A few hours more will not harm me. Lily hesitated, then nodded. She changed into her least damaged dress, pinned her hair more neatly, and saddled the mule that served as her only remaining transportation. The ride to Cedar Bluff, the nearest town, took just over an hour, and with each mile, she felt her anxiety growing. She had not been to town since the day of the attack, had not faced the whispers and stares that she knew would be waiting. Cedar Bluff was not much to look at. A single main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a general store, a saloon, a church, a blacksmith, and a handful of houses scattered around the periphery. It was Saturday, which meant the street was busier than usual, farmers and ranchers coming in for supplies and gossip. Lily tied her mule outside the general store and took a deep breath before pushing through the door. The bell above the entrance chimed, and conversation inside immediately ceased. Lily felt every eye turned toward her, felt the weight of judgment and curiosity pressing down like a physical force. Martha Jenkins stood behind the counter, a thin woman with sharp features and sharper opinions. Her expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes were cold. Mrs. Voss, she said, her tone professionally polite but lacking any warmth. What can I do for you today? Lily approached the counter, pulling out the list she had made. I need nails, 20 pounds if you have them. Some rope, tar paper for roofing, flour, coffee and salt, she recited, keeping her voice steady. Martha took the list, her eyes scanning it briefly before looking up. That will be expensive, she said. Do you have the money? The question was pointed, deliberately insulting. Lily felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her expression calm. I have money, she said, pulling out the small leather pouch where she kept her remaining funds. Martha began gathering the items with exaggerated slowness, and Lily became aware of the other customers in the store. 3 women she recognized vaguely from church gatherings, now clustered near the fabric section and whispering behind their hands. One of them, Clara Whitmore, a woman whose face seemed permanently pinched with disapproval, spoke just loudly enough to be heard. I heard she has a savage living on her property, Clara said, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. Can you imagine a decent Christian woman harboring one of those heathens? Maybe she is not so decent after all, another woman replied. You know what they say about widows, desperate for any kind of attention. Lily's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. She forced herself to remain still, to not give them the satisfaction of a reaction. I heard Samuel Hartwig paid her a visit this morning, the third woman added. Tried to warn her about the talk, but she would not listen. Some people have no sense of propriety. Martha Jenkins was watching Lily closely, waiting to see how she would respond. The store had fallen completely silent now, everyone waiting for the confrontation that seemed inevitable. Lily took a slow breath, then turned to face the women directly. "If you have something to say to me," she said clearly, "then say it to my face rather than whisper it like cowards." Clara Whitmore had the grace to look momentarily flustered, but she recovered quickly. "We are simply concerned, Mrs. Voss," she said with false sweetness, "for your safety and your reputation. Associating with Indians, especially Comanche, it reflects poorly on the entire community. The man you are so concerned about has helped me more in 2 days than this entire community has helped me in 8 months, Lily said, her voice hard. He has asked for nothing, taken nothing, and done nothing but honest labor to help me rebuild what Outlaws destroyed. If that offends your delicate sensibilities, then perhaps you should examine your own prejudices rather than judge my choices." "How dare you?" Clara sputtered, her face flushing red. "We are good Christian women trying to maintain standards in a lawless land." "Then perhaps you should practice the Christian charity you claim to value," Lily shot back. "Because from where I stand, the savage you are so afraid of has shown more kindness and honor than any of you." The silence that followed was absolute. Martha Jenkins had stopped even pretending to gather supplies, her mouth hanging slightly open. The other women looked between each other, scandalized and thrilled in equal measure. Lily knew she had crossed a line, had said things that could not be unsaid, but she found she did not care. The anger that had been building inside her for months, the resentment and hurt and bone-deep exhaustion had finally found its outlet. "My supplies, Mrs. Jenkins," Lily said, turning back to the counter. "If you please." Martha seemed to shake herself out of her shock and finished gathering the items with mechanical efficiency. She tallied the cost, her lips pressed into a thin line, and Lily counted out the money with hands that shook slightly from adrenaline. As Martha handed over the parcels, she leaned in slightly. "You have made enemies today," she said quietly. "Powerful ones. I hope your Indian friend is worth it." "He is worth more than all of you combined," Lily said, took her supplies, and walked out of the store with her head held high. The ride back to the homestead seemed longer than the ride in, Lily's mind replaying the confrontation over and over, analyzing every word, every look. She knew there would be consequences, knew that she had likely sealed her fate as a pariah in Cedar Bluff, but underneath the worry was something else. A fierce pride in having finally spoken her truth, in having refused to bow to the expectations and prejudices of people who had never shown her anything but judgment. When she arrived back at the cabin, Mukwuru was on the roof, laying shingles with methodical precision. He looked up at her approach, and something in her expression must have told him what had happened, because he climbed down immediately. "There was trouble," he said, "not a question." "There was honesty," Lily replied, dismounting and beginning to unload the supplies, "which amounts to the same thing." She told him about the confrontation as they worked, expecting him to be angry or concerned, but he simply listened, nodding occasionally. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You should not have defended me so fiercely," he said finally. "These people, they can make your life very difficult." "They already have," Lily said, "and I am tired of caring what they think. I'm tired of being afraid of their judgment, of walking on eggshells so I do not offend their narrow view of how the world should be." Mukwuru studied her face, and she met his gaze without flinching. "You are braver than you know," he said softly, and there was something in his voice that made her breath catch. "Or more foolish," she replied, trying to lighten the moment. "Sometimes they are the same thing," he said, and the corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been a smile. They worked through the rest of the afternoon in companionable silence, the confrontation in town fading into background noise against the immediate satisfaction of progress. The roof was nearly complete now, shingled and solid, ready to withstand the coming winter storms. The walls had been reinforced where the Outlaws had weakened them, gaps filled and boards replaced. It was not pretty, not yet, but it was functional. It was shelter, it was home. As the sun began its descent, Lily realized with a start that they had worked through lunch. too absorbed in their tasks to notice the passage of time. Her stomach growled audibly and she laughed. "I am a terrible host," she said. "I have not fed you all day." "I have eaten less for worse reasons," Mukwuru replied. "But food would be welcome." They built up the fire together, and Lily made a simple stew from dried beans and the last of her salted pork. They ate, sitting on the newly repaired porch steps, watching the sky turn shades of amber and rose as the sun sank below the hills. In the gathering darkness, Lily felt something shift between them, a deepening of the connection that had been forming over the past 2 days. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything, for helping me, for staying even after you knew it would cause problems." "You do not need to thank me," Mukwuru said. "You would do the same if our positions were reversed. I see that in you." Lily thought about that, about whether it was true, about whether she would have the courage to help someone if it meant facing the kind of judgment and hostility that Mukwuru had endured simply for existing in spaces white settlers considered theirs. "I hope I would," she said honestly. "I hope I would be that brave. You already are," he said, and the certainty in his voice made something warm unfold in her chest. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, and for the first time since Daniel's death, Lily felt something that resembled peace. The third morning dawned cold and grey, clouds hanging low over the hills like a wool blanket, promising rain before nightfall. Lily woke to the sound of wind rattling the newly repaired shutters, a sound that was both reassuring and strange after days of listening to wind whistle through open gaps. She dressed quickly, pulling on her warmest shawl, and stepped outside to find Mukwuru already there, not working this time but standing at the edge of the clearing, staring toward the southern horizon with an intensity that made her chest tighten. "What is it?" she asked, moving to stand beside him. He did not answer immediately, his eyes still fixed on some distant point she could not see. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with something she had not heard before. "Conflict, I have stayed too long," he said. "The Fletcher gang has gained 3 days on me, maybe more. Every hour I remain here is an hour they get closer to the border. To escape," Lily felt her stomach drop. She had known this moment would come, had known from the beginning that his help was temporary, that he had his own mission, his own people waiting for justice. But knowing it intellectually and feeling the reality of it were two different things entirely. "Then you should go," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You have already done more than I had any right to expect." Mukwuru turned to look at her then, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. Duty, pulling against something else, something neither of them had named. "The cabin is not finished," he said. "The chimney needs repair. There are still gaps in the walls that will let in cold. You need at least 2 more days of work to be ready for winter." "I can finish it," Lily said, lifting her chin. "I did not know what I was doing when I started. But you have taught me I can manage the rest alone." "You should not have to manage it alone," Mukwuru said. And there was frustration in his voice now, directed not at her but at the impossible situation. "You have already lost too much, sacrificed too much. It is not fair that you should have to keep fighting with no help." "Turt, life is not fair," Lily said with a bitter laugh. "I learned that when Daniel died, I learned it again when the outlaws came. Fairness is a luxury for people who have never had to truly struggle." Mukwuru was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as if chewing on words he could not quite bring himself to speak. Finally he turned to face her fully. "My people are counting on me," he said. "The elder who was killed, his name was Pahayoko. He taught me to hunt when I was a boy. He told me stories of the old days, of when the plains stretched forever and our people were free to follow the buffalo. He deserved better than to be killed by cowards who steal in the night. His family deserves justice." "Then go to them," Lily said, even as her heart screamed against the words. "Give them what they need, what you promised them." "But what about what you need?" Mukwuru asked, and the question hung between them, heavy with implications neither was quite ready to explore. Lily swallowed hard, forcing down the surge of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. She thought of Daniel, of the promises they had made to each other, the life they had tried to build. She thought of the long months of grief and loneliness, of learning to survive without him. And she thought of the past 3 days, of the unexpected gift of companionship, of not having to face every challenge alone. "I need to know I can survive on my own," she said finally. "I need to know that I am strong enough to build this life without depending on anyone else. Because depending on people, caring about people, it only leads to loss, and I will not go through that kind of pain again." The words came out harsher than she intended, a wall thrown up against feelings that terrified her more than any physical danger. Mokwuru studied her face, seeing past the defensive anger to the fear underneath. "You think staying alone protects you from loss," he said quietly. "But it only guarantees that you will never have anything worth losing. My sister died fighting for people she loved, and yes, her death brought pain, brought grief that still cuts like a knife. But I would not trade the years I had with her for a lifetime of safety. She made me better, made me braver, and her memory still does." Lily felt tears burning behind her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "Your sister was lucky to have someone who loved her so much," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "And I was lucky to have her," Mokwuru replied. "Just as you were lucky to have your husband, just as I have been lucky these past days to work beside someone who refuses to surrender even when the world demands it." The tears spilled over then, hot tracks down her cold cheeks, and Lily did not bother to wipe them away. She was so tired of being strong, so tired of holding everything inside, so tired of pretending that loneliness was the same as independence. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered. "How to let someone in when I know they will leave. Everyone leaves. Everyone dies or goes away. And I am always the one left behind to pick up the pieces." Mokwuru stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him despite the cold air. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "I cannot promise I will not leave," he said. "I cannot promise I will not die. Those are promises no one can make. But I can promise that for as long as I am here, for as long as I am able, I will stand with you. That is all any of us can offer the moment we have. The help we can give now." Lily looked up at him, at this man who had appeared from nowhere, who owed her nothing, who had already given her so much. She saw the scars on his face, the weight he carried, the grief he lived with. She saw someone who understood loss, not as an abstract concept, but as a lived reality. Someone who had chosen to keep living, keep helping, keep caring, despite knowing the cost. "Stay one more day," she heard herself say. "Help me finish the chimney and then go. Do what you need to do. Get justice for Pahayoko, but give me one more day." Something shifted in Mukwuru's expression, relief mixed with something deeper, something that looked almost like gratitude. "One more day," he agreed, "and then I ride south." They spent the morning working on the chimney, which had partially collapsed during the Outlaw attack. It was delicate work, requiring them to dismantle the damaged section stone by stone, then rebuild it with a mixture of mud and clay to seal the gaps. Mokwuru showed Lily how to test each stone for stability, how to pack the mortar so it would not crack when heated, how to angle the flue so smoke would draw properly. As they worked, Lily found herself talking more than she had in months, telling Mokwuru about her life before Texas, about growing up in St. Louis, about how she had met Daniel at a church social when she was 19. He had been passing through the city on his way west, looking for land to claim, looking for a fresh start. He had been charming and earnest and full of dreams, and she had been young enough to believe that dreams were enough. "Was he a good husband?" Mokwuru asked as they fitted another stone into place. Lily considered the question carefully. "He was a good man," she said finally. "Kind, hard-working, faithful, but he was not always a good husband. He made decisions without consulting me, spent money we did not have on schemes that never worked out, brought us to this land without really understanding what it would require. He loved me, I know he did, but sometimes love is not enough when you are trying to survive." "Do you resent him for bringing you here?" Mukwuru asked. "Sometimes," Lily admitted, surprised by her own honesty, "especially in those first months after he died. When I was alone and terrified and angry at him for leaving me with this impossible situation. But then I realized that being angry at a dead man was pointless. He did the best he could with what he knew, and so am I." Mukwuru nodded, understanding implicit in the gesture. "My wife also died," he said quietly, and Lily's hand stilled on the stone she was holding. She had not known, had not even thought to ask if he had family, if he had loved and lost as she had. She waited, not pushing, letting him decide what to share. "Her name was Casa," he continued, his voice steady but distant. "It means dressed in furs. She died giving birth to our son. They both died. She bled, and the baby would not breathe, and I could do nothing but watch them slip away." Lily felt her throat close with empathy, with shared grief. "How long ago?" she asked gently. 3 years, Mukwuru said. 3 years, and I still sometimes wake thinking I hear her voice. Still reach for her in the darkness before remembering she is gone." They sat in silence for a moment, two people who had lost everything, who had survived when others had not, who carried their dead with them like shadows. "Does it get easier?" Lily asked. "The grief, does it ever truly fade?" "It changes," Mukwuru said. "It becomes something you carry instead of something that carries you. Some days are harder than others. Some days I can remember her smile without crying. Other days the weight of her absence crushes me, but I keep living, keep moving. Because that is what she would have wanted. She was strong like you. She would not want me to stop living just because she could not." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. Lily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of mud across her cheek. "I think Daniel would have liked you," she said with a sad smile. "He always respected people who worked hard and kept their word." "And I think Casa would have liked you," Mukwuru replied. "She always said the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire." They returned to their work with a new understanding between them, a recognition of shared experience that went deeper than words. The chimney took shape under their hands, solid and straight, promising warmth through the coming winter. By afternoon, they had finished the stonework and were allowing the mortar to set when the sound of approaching horses once again shattered the peace. This time there were more riders, at least 6, led by Samuel Hartwick with his sons flanking him. But there were also men Lily did not recognize, rough-looking men with hard eyes and guns worn loose in their holsters. Her heart began to pound as she recognized the type, if not the individuals, hired men, the kind who did not ask questions as long as the money was good. Mukwuru was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. Lily stood beside him, trying to project a confidence she did not feel. Samuel reined in his horse at the edge of the clearing, his face set in grim lines. "Mrs. Voss," he said, his voice carrying formal weight, "I am here on behalf of the community. We have discussed your situation, and we have decided that for your own safety and the safety of others, you cannot continue to harbor this Indian on your property." "This is my land," Lily said, her voice sharp. "You have no authority. Here, we have the authority of concerned citizens," Samuel replied, "and we have the numbers to enforce our concerns. We are giving you one chance. Tell him to leave now, peacefully, and there will be no trouble." "And if I refuse?" Lily asked, though she already knew the answer. One of the hired men, a lean fellow with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Then we will remove him by force," he said, his hand resting on his pistol. "And if you get in the way, well, accidents happen." Mukwuru stepped forward slightly, placing himself between Lily and the riders. "I will leave," he said calmly. "There is no need for violence." "No," Lily said sharply, grabbing his arm. "You will not be driven away by these bullies." "Lily," Mukwuru said quietly, using her given name for the first time. "This is not a fight worth having. I have stayed too long already. It is time I continued my hunt." "But the cabin," Lily protested. "We are not finished." "You are finished enough," he said. "You can complete the rest. I have taught you what you need to know." Samuel Hartwick looked between them, his expression unreadable. "Wise choice, Indian," he said. "Mount up and ride out and do not come back to this territory." Mukwuru ignored him, turning instead to face Lily fully. In his eyes, she saw apology, regret, and something else, something that made her chest ache with possibilities that would never be explored. "Thank you," he said simply, "for your kindness, for your courage, for reminding me that there is still good in this world." "Do not thank me," Lily said, her voice breaking. "Do not make this sound like goodbye." "It is not goodbye," Mukwuru said. "It is simply until we meet again." He walked to his horse, which had been grazing peacefully nearby, and swung into the saddle with practiced ease. The hired men watched him carefully, hands still on their weapons, but he made no threatening moves. He looked down at Lily one last time, memorizing her face as if trying to burn it into his memory. "Finish strong," he said. "Do not let them. Break what you have built." Then he turned his horse toward the south and rode away, not hurrying but not lingering either, simply leaving as he had arrived, silently and with dignity. Lily stood watching until he disappeared into the trees, her fingernails digging crescents into her palms, rage and grief warring inside her chest. Samuel Hartwick cleared his throat. "You did the right thing, Mrs. Voss," he said. "In time. You will see that." Lily turned on him with such fury that his horse actually stepped back. "Get off my land," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "All of you, get off my land right now." "Now, Mrs. Voss," Samuel began. "I said get off my land," Lily shouted. "You come here with your guns and your threats and your righteous judgment. You drive away the one person who actually helped me, and then you have the audacity to tell me it was for my own good. You are not my protector, Mr. Hartwick. You are my oppressor, and I want you gone." The men exchanged glances, clearly not having expected such vehemence. The scarred hired man looked like he wanted to say something, but Samuel raised a hand to stop him. "We will go," he said stiffly. "But remember, Mrs. Voss, you have made your choice. Do not come looking for help from this community when winter sets in and you realize you cannot survive alone." "I would rather freeze to death than accept help from you," Lily spat. Samuel's face darkened, but he said nothing more, simply turned his horse and rode away, his men following behind like a pack of dogs called to heel. Lily stood in the clearing, shaking with emotion, staring at the empty space where Mukwuru had been just moments before. The silence felt oppressive, suffocating, a return to the loneliness she had briefly escaped. She walked slowly back to the cabin, to the walls they had repaired together, to the roof they had rebuilt, to the chimney they had finished just that morning. Everything looked the same, but everything had changed. She ran her hand along the doorframe, feeling the smoothness where Mukwuru had planed away rough edges, seeing the care and skill evident in every joint and seam. That night, Lily sat, alone by the fire, the cabin walls solid around her, but feeling somehow emptier than they had when they were broken. She thought about Mukwuru riding south, hunting men who had killed someone he loved. She thought about the choice he had made to stay and help her, the time he had given that he could not spare. She thought about his words, about carrying grief, instead of being carried by it, about the courage required to keep caring even when caring brought pain. And she thought about what she wanted, not what was expected of her, not what was safe or proper or acceptable, but what she truly wanted. The answer frightened her with its clarity. She wanted to stop being alone. She wanted to stop pretending that isolation was the same as strength. She wanted, more than anything, to see Mukwuru again, to thank him properly, to tell him things. She had been too afraid to say, but he was gone, riding toward danger and possibly death, and she was here, exactly where she had started, alone in a partially repaired cabin at the edge of nowhere. The only difference was that now she knew what she was missing, and that knowledge hurt worse than any physical wound. 4 days passed in a blur of solitary labor and sleepless nights. Lily threw herself into finishing the cabin with an almost desperate intensity, as if by completing the work she could somehow fill the void that Mukwuru's departure had left. She patched the remaining gaps in the walls, installed the salvaged window frames, built crude furniture from leftover timber, a table, 2 chairs, a shelf for her meager supplies. Her hands developed new calluses on top of old ones, and she barely noticed the pain. The weather turned colder, frost coating the ground each morning in crystalline white. The sky remained overcast, threatening snow but never quite delivering. Lily worked from first light until darkness forced her inside, collapsing each night onto her bedroll too exhausted to do anything but sleep. She did not go to town. Did not seek out company, spoke to no one but herself and occasionally the birds that flitted through the clearing. On the 5th morning, she woke to the smell of smoke. Not the clean smell of her own fire, but something acrid and wrong. She scrambled outside, heart pounding, and saw it immediately, a dark column rising from the southeast, thick and black against the grey sky. Her first thought was lightning strike, but there had been no storm. Her second thought was accident, but the smoke was too concentrated, too deliberate. She stood frozen for a moment, torn between curiosity and caution, then made her decision. She saddled her mule quickly, grabbed her rifle and canteen, and rode toward the smoke. The journey took nearly an hour, following game trails and old wagon tracks, the smoke growing thicker as she approached until she could taste ash in the air. What she found made her blood run cold. The Caldwell homestead, or what was left of it, stood engulfed in flames. The main house was already collapsed, timbers blazing like a funeral pyre, while the barn still stood but burned fiercely from within. Scattered around the property were bodies, Mr. Caldwell face down near the well, Mrs. Caldwell sprawled in the doorway of the house, their teenage son Marcus lying twisted near the barn. All of them had been shot. Lily dismounted on shaking legs, her rifle raised, scanning the area for any sign of the attackers. The scene was fresh, the bodies still bleeding, the fires not yet burned to embers. Whoever had done this might still be nearby. She approached Mrs. Caldwell first, hoping against hope to find some sign of life, but the woman's eyes stared sightlessly at the smoke-filled sky, a bullet hole in her chest. A sound from the barn made Lily spin around, rifle at her shoulder. She waited, heart hammering, then heard it again, a whimper definitely human. She approached cautiously, the heat from the flames making her eyes water. Inside the barn, partially hidden behind a stack of hay bales that had not yet caught fire, she found Emma Caldwell, the family's youngest daughter, no more than 14 years old. The girl was curled in a ball, her dress torn and bloody, her face streaked with soot and tears. When she saw Lily, she let out a cry and tried to scramble backward. "Emma, it is me, Lily Voss," Lily said quickly, lowering her rifle. "I am not going to hurt you, but we need to get you out of here now." The girl stared at her with wild eyes, trembling so violently her teeth chattered. "They killed them," Emma whispered. "They killed everyone. They laughed while they did it." "Who?" Lily demanded, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it. "The outlaws," Emma sobbed. "The Fletcher gang. They came at dawn. Pa tried to fight them, but there were too many. They shot him first, then Marcus. Then Mama, when she tried to run." Lily felt rage surge through her, hot and fierce, overwhelming even her fear. "No, why did they spare you?" she asked, though part of her did not want to know the answer. "They did not spare me," Emma said, her voice breaking. "They said I was too young to bother with, told me to run and see if I could outrun their bullets. I hid instead. I hid like a coward while my family died." "You are not a coward," Lily said firmly. moving forward to pull the girl to her feet. "You survived, that is what matters. But we need to leave now if they come back." A gunshot cracked through the air, and wood splintered near Lily's head. She grabbed Emma and dove behind a water trough as more shots followed, striking the barn, the ground, the fence posts. Through the smoke and flames, she saw them. 5 riders emerging from the tree line, spread out in a loose line, guns drawn. The Fletcher gang had not left after all. They had been waiting, watching, perhaps hoping more neighbors would come to investigate. Lily recognized the leader immediately from descriptions she had heard. Silas Fletcher, a tall man with a red beard and cold eyes, riding a paint horse with a blue bandana tied around his neck. "Well now," Fletcher called out, his voice carrying over the crackle of flames. "Looks like we got ourselves another one, and this one brought a rifle. That is just adorable." His men laughed, spreading out to surround the barn. Lily calculated quickly. 5 of them. 1 of her, maybe 6 shots in her rifle if she was lucky, and a terrified girl to protect. The odds were impossible. "Leave the girl and run," Fletcher offered. "We got no quarrel with you specifically, lady. We just take what we want and kill anyone stupid enough to fight back. You look smart enough to know when you are beat." Lily's mind raced. The barn was burning. Their cover would not last long. The homestead offered no escape route. They were surrounded on all sides. Emma was pressed against her, shaking so hard Lily could feel it through her own body. She thought of Daniel, of how he had died in a senseless fight over nothing. She thought of Mukworu, riding south to hunt these very men, probably days away by now. She thought of the cabin she had worked so hard to rebuild, that she might never see again. Then she thought of something else. Of the way Mukworu had faced down the Hartwicks without fear, of the quiet strength he had shown, of his words about his sister fighting even when the fight was hopeless. And she made her choice. "Go to hell," she shouted back, raised her rifle and fired. Her shot took one of Fletcher's men in the shoulder, spinning him out of his saddle. The others opened fire immediately, bullets tearing through the barn, through the water trough, through the air so close Lily felt the wind of their passage. She returned fire, working the bolt action as fast as she could, shooting not to kill, but to keep them back, to buy time for something, anything. She was down to her last 2 bullets when she heard it. Another rifle, different caliber, firing from a different direction entirely. One of Fletcher's men cried out and fell. Then another shot and another, each one precise and deadly, coming from the tree line to the north. Fletcher's remaining men scattered, returning fire wildly, trying to locate this new threat through the smoke. Lily saw him, Mukworu on foot, moving between trees like a ghost, his rifle firing with mechanical efficiency. He had circled around behind the gang, using the terrain and their focus on Lily to his advantage. 2 more shots and 2 more outlaws fell, leaving only Fletcher and 1 other man still mounted. Fletcher wheeled his horse around, finally understanding the trap he had ridden into. "Fall back!" he shouted to his remaining companion. "Fall back now!" But Mukworu stepped out from cover, his rifle aimed steady at Fletcher's chest. "You killed Pahayoko," he said, his voice carrying across the burning homestead. "Elder of my people, teacher, friend. You killed him for horses and money. You killed him because you thought no one would make you answer for it." Fletcher's hand moved toward his pistol, but froze when Mukworu's finger tightened on the trigger. "You can try," Mukworu said calmly, "but you will be dead before your gun clears leather. Or you can surrender, face justice for what you have done." "Justice," Fletcher spat, "from a savage that is rich." "No," a new voice called out, "justice from the law." A group of riders emerged from the opposite tree line, led by a man wearing a marshal's star on his vest. Behind him rode Samuel Hartwick and several other men from Cedar Bluff, all armed, all grim-faced. The marshal, a weathered man in his 50s with grey hair and sharp eyes, rode forward slowly. "Silas Fletcher," he said, "you are under arrest for murder, arson, theft, and about a dozen other charges I will think of on the way to Austin. Drop your weapons, or I will give the Comanche permission to finish what he started." Fletcher looked around, seeing he was surrounded, outnumbered, with nowhere to run. His face twisted with rage and something like despair. Then he threw down his pistol and raised his hands. His companion did the same, both men dismounting at the marshal's order. The marshal's deputies moved forward to bind the prisoners, while the marshal himself approached Mukwuru. "I have been tracking this gang for 3 months," he said. "Lost them twice. Would have lost them again if someone had not sent word about suspicious riders heading south through Hartwick territory. I assume that was you?" Mukwuru nodded slightly. "I have been tracking them for 2 weeks," he said. "They killed my people, took what was not theirs." "Well, they will hang for it," the marshal said. "You have my word on that, and if you want to testify at the trial, I will make sure your voice is heard." Samuel Hartwick dismounted and walked over to where Lily still crouched behind the water trough with Emma. His face was ashen as he took in the destruction. The bodies of his neighbors, the terrified girl. "Mrs. Voss," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. We were wrong about you." "About him." He glanced at Mukwuru. "We let fear and prejudice blind us to what was right in front of us. You have more courage than any of us." Lily stood slowly, Emma clinging to her arm, her entire body numb with shock and exhaustion. "Your apology means nothing to the Caldwells," she said flatly. "It means nothing to Emma, who watched her family murdered while you were busy running off the one man who might have stopped this." Samuel flinched as if struck. "You are right," he said, "and I will carry that weight the rest of my life. But please let us help now. Let us do what we can to make this right." Lily wanted to refuse, wanted to throw his offer back in his face. But she looked at Emma, traumatized and orphaned, and knew the girl needed more than her anger could provide. "Take Emma to town," she said. "Find her somewhere safe. Somewhere she can heal." "What about you?" Samuel asked. "I need to speak with Mukwuru," Lily said, her eyes finding him across the burning homestead. Samuel nodded and gently took Emma's arm, leading her toward his horse. The men began the grim work of collecting the bodies, of trying to salvage anything from the flames. The marshal supervised his prisoners, binding them securely to their saddles. Through all of this, Lily walked toward Mukwuru, her legs unsteady, her mind struggling to process everything that had happened. He met her halfway, and for a long moment they simply stood there, looking at each other, both covered in soot and blood, both trembling with adrenaline and relief. Tom. "You came back," Lily said, and her voice broke on the words. "I never truly left," Mukwuru replied. "I rode south, yes, but I could not stop thinking about you, about the cabin, about what we had built together. And then I saw the smoke, heard the gunfire, and I knew—" "You saved my life," Lily said. "If you had not been there, if you had not come when you did." "You saved your own life," Mukwuru interrupted. "You stood and fought when you could have run. You protected that girl when it would have been easier to save yourself. You have always been strong enough. You just needed to see it." Lily felt tears streaming down her face, hot tracks through the soot and grime. "I was so angry when you left," she admitted. "Angry at you, at the Hartwicks, at myself for caring, for letting you matter when I knew you would go." "I'm sorry I left," Mukwuru said, stepping closer. "I thought I was protecting you, thought that by leaving I would spare you the community's anger, but I was wrong. I was a coward. I ran because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" Lily asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "Afraid of this," Mukwuru said, gesturing between them, "of what you make me feel. Of wanting something I thought I had no right to want. After Casa died, I told myself I would never love again, that it hurt too much, that I could not survive losing someone else I cared about. But then I met you, and you made me want to try. You made me want to risk the pain if it meant having the joy." Lily's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "I'm afraid too," she whispered. "Terrified, actually, of losing you, of losing anyone, of opening myself up to that kind of hurt again. But I realized something while you were gone. Being alone does not protect you from pain. It just guarantees you will face it without anyone to help carry the weight. Mukwuru reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he cupped her face in his hands, his palms rough and warm against her tear-stained cheeks. I cannot promise I will never leave, he said. I cannot promise I will never die. Those are promises no one can make. But I can promise that for as long as I draw breath, I will choose you. I will stand with you. I will fight beside you. That is all I have to offer. But it is yours if you want it. Lily reached up and covered his hands with hers, holding them against her face. I want it, she said. I want you, I want us, whatever that means. Whatever shape it takes. I'm tired of being afraid, tired of being alone. I want to build something with you, something real. Mukwuru smiled then, truly smiled, and it transformed his face, softening the hard lines, lighting his eyes with warmth. Then we will build it together, he said. One log at a time, one day at a time, for as long as we are both standing. He leaned forward and Lily rose on her toes to meet him, their lips coming together in a kiss that tasted of smoke and salt and promise. Around them the world continued. The fire burned. The marshal secured his prisoners. The men of Cedar Bluff dealt with the aftermath of violence. But in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered was this: two broken people choosing to be whole together. Two survivors refusing to let fear win. Two hearts deciding that love, even love that might end in loss, was worth the risk. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Mukwuru rested his forehead against hers. We should go home, he said, to the cabin, to the life we started building. Home, Lily repeated, testing the word, finding it fit perfectly. Yes, let us go home. They walked together to where their horses waited, mounted up, and rode away from the burning homestead, away from death and destruction, toward something better, toward a future they would forge together with their own hands and their own hearts. Toward home. The ride back to the cabin took longer than expected, both of them moving slowly, their bodies exhausted from violence and emotion, their minds still processing everything that had happened. The sky had darkened further, heavy clouds finally making good on their threat, and by the time they reached the clearing, the first fat snowflakes were beginning to fall, drifting down like white ash, catching in their hair and melting on their skin. The cabin stood exactly as they had left it, solid and waiting, smoke curling from the chimney where Lily had banked the fire that morning. It looked different to her now, not just a structure built from necessity, but a home created through shared effort. Every board and nail a testament to something larger than survival, a testament to choice, to partnership, to the possibility of beginning again. They dismounted in silence, neither quite ready to break the spell of what had passed between them at the Caldwell homestead. Mukwuru tended to the horses, while Lily went inside to stoke the fire and put water on to boil. Her hands shook as she worked, residual adrenaline still coursing through her system, mixing with emotions she could not quite name. She heard Mukwuru enter behind her, his footsteps soft on the newly laid floorboards. Sit, she said without turning around. You are wounded. She had noticed it during the ride back. The way he favored his left side, the dark stain spreading across his shirt. He had taken a bullet, probably during the firefight, and said nothing about it. Typical, she thought, with a mixture of exasperation and affection. It is nothing, Mukwuru said, but he sat anyway at the table they had built together, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at whatever injury he was hiding. Lily turned to face him, hands on her hips. Take off your shirt, she ordered. Let me see. For a moment she thought he might refuse. That same stubborn independence that had kept him moving when most men would have collapsed. But then he began unbuttoning the shirt, peeling it away carefully to reveal a deep graze along his ribs, still bleeding sluggishly. The bullet had carved a furrow through flesh but had not penetrated. A mercy given how much worse it could have been. Lily fetched her medical supplies, meager as they were. A bottle of whiskey Daniel had kept for emergencies. Clean rags torn from an old petticoat, needle and thread. She poured water from the kettle into a basin and set to work cleaning the wound. her touch as gentle as she could manage. Mukwuru sat perfectly still, not flinching even when she poured whiskey directly into the injury, watching her face with an intensity that made her self-conscious. "You have done this before," he observed, his voice strained but steady. "Daniel was not always careful," Lily said, focusing on her work. "He cut himself more times than I can count. Building this place. Once he nearly took off his thumb with a saw. I stitched him up and told him if he did it again, I would let him bleed." "Did he do it again?" Mukwuru asked. "Of course he did," Lily said with a sad smile. "Stubborn man. Thought being tough meant ignoring wounds until they festered. I spent half our marriage patching him up and scolding him for his recklessness." She threaded the needle, her hand steady despite the trembling in her chest. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "I know," Mukwuru said simply. She stitched the wound closed with small, precise movements, the way her mother had taught her years ago. Mukwuru's jaw tightened, but he made no sound, his eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, she tied off the thread and sat back examining her work. It was not pretty, but it would hold, would heal cleanly if he took care of it. "You should rest," she said. "You have lost blood. Pushed yourself too hard." "Later," Mukwuru said, catching her wrist gently as she moved to stand. "First, we need to talk, really talk, about what happens next." Lily sat back down, suddenly nervous. In the chaos of the attack, in the heat of their declarations, she had not thought through the practicalities, the complications of what they were choosing. Now, in the quiet safety of the cabin, reality pressed in. "The town will not accept this," she said, voicing the fear that had been growing in her mind. "Us together, they barely tolerated you helping me rebuild. They will never accept you living here, loving me." "Do you care what they accept?" Mukwuru asked. Lily thought about it, really thought about it, weighing the isolation against the alternative. "No," she said finally, surprised by the certainty in her own voice. "I do not. They have never helped me, never supported me. They have only judged and condemned and tried to force me into boxes that do not fit. I am done living for their approval." "Then we do not live for them," Mukwuru said. "We live for ourselves. We build our life here, on this land, and let them think what they will. It will not be easy," Lily warned. "There will be consequences, harassment, maybe violence. There are laws against what we are." She could not quite bring herself to name it. This thing between them that transcended the simple categories the world wanted to impose. "There are laws against many things," Mukwuru said. "Against my people existing on our own land. Against us, hunting the buffalo that sustained us for generations. Against us speaking our own language, teaching our own children. I have lived my entire life breaking laws that were designed to erase me. One more law, one made by people who do not understand love. Means nothing to me." Lily felt tears prick her eyes again. Seemed she could not stop crying today, but these were different tears, born not of grief or fear, but of something like hope. "What about your people?" she asked. "Will they accept me, a white woman? After everything my people have done to yours?" Mukwuru was quiet for a long moment, his thumb absently tracing circles on the inside of her wrist where he still held her. "Some will accept you," he said honestly. "Some will not. There is anger among my people. Justified anger at the broken treaties, the stolen land, the murdered children. That anger does not disappear simply because two people find love across the divide. But there are also those who believe that understanding between our peoples is possible, that there can be honor and respect even between old enemies. My sister believed that. She would have liked you, would have welcomed you. I wish I could have met her," Lily said softly. "You are like her in many ways," Mukwuru said. "Strong, stubborn, willing to fight for what matters. She would have recognized that strength, would have called you sister." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Anne still joined the fire, crackling softly, snow falling steadily outside. Lily thought about the future, about what their life might look like, the challenges they would face, the joy they might find. It would not be the life she had imagined when she married Daniel, would not be the safe, conventional existence she had once wanted. It would be harder, more complicated, filled with obstacles that most people never had to consider. But it would be theirs, built on honesty and choice, on shared struggle and mutual respect. And that, she realized, was worth more than any amount of social acceptance. "I want to learn," she said suddenly, "about your people, your language, your ways. If I'm going to be part of your life, I want to understand where you come from." Mukwuru smiled, genuine warmth in his expression. "And I want to learn from you," he said, "about your world, your stories, your dreams. We will teach each other, build something new from both our traditions." A knock at the door interrupted them, sharp and unexpected. Both of them tensed, Mukwuru's hand moving instinctively toward his knife. Lily stood slowly, moving to the door. "Who is it?" she called out. "Samuel Hartwick, ma'am," came the reply. "I am alone, unarmed. I just want to talk." Lily glanced at Mukwuru, who nodded slightly. She opened the door to find Samuel, standing in the falling snow, hat in hand, looking older and more tired than she had ever seen him. Behind him, at a respectful distance, his horse waited patiently. "Mr. Hartwick," Lily said coolly, "what do you want?" "To apologize," Samuel said, properly this time, not with excuses or justifications. Just a plain apology for the harm I caused, the harm we all caused. Lily considered sending him away. Part of her wanted to make him feel even a fraction of the isolation and judgment she had endured. But Mukwuru's words echoed in her mind, about understanding between peoples, about choosing something better than cycles of anger and retribution. "Come in," she said, stepping back, but only for a moment. Samuel entered, brushing snow from his coat, his eyes taking in the cabin, the repairs, the evidence of hard work and careful craftsmanship. He saw Mukwuru sitting at the table, shirtless and bandaged, and had the grace to look ashamed. "Mr. Mukwuru," Samuel said, addressing him directly for the first time, "I owe you an apology as well. I let fear and prejudice guide my actions. Drove you away when you were doing nothing but helping a neighbor. I was wrong, and that wrong nearly cost Mrs. Voss her life. Cost Emma her family. There is no excuse for what I did." Mukwuru regarded him steadily, his face unreadable. "You were protecting your community," he said finally. "I understand that impulse, even if I do not agree with how you did it. The question is, what will you do now? Will you continue to see me as a threat? Or will you accept that I'm here to stay?" Samuel swallowed hard, clearly struggling with something internal. "The town met this evening," he said. "After the marshal took the Fletcher gang away, we talked about what happened, about how wrong we were, about the Caldwells, and what might have been prevented if we had been less focused on who was helping and more focused on actual threats." He paused, turning his hat in his hands. "We want to do better," he continued. "I want to build a community that does not drive away good people because they do not fit our narrow expectations. It will not happen overnight. There are still those who will never accept, who will never change. But there are also those of us who want to try, who want to learn from our mistakes." "Why are you telling us this?" Lily asked, suspicious of sudden changes of heart. "Because you deserve to know that you will not face this alone," Samuel said. "That there are people who will stand with you, who will speak up when others try to drive you out. It is not much, and it does not erase what we did. But it is a start." Lily looked at Mukwuru, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. Trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild, required proof, not just words. But she also knew that communities, like people, could change, could grow, could become better versions of themselves if given the chance. "We will see," she said finally. "Words are easy, Mr. Hartwick. It is actions that matter. Prove that you mean what you say. Show us that this community can be better than its worst impulses. Then maybe we can believe you." Samuel nodded, seeming to accept that conditional trust was all he could expect. "Fair enough," he said. "And Mrs. Voss, if you need anything, supplies, help with the final work on the cabin, someone to vouch for you if there is legal trouble, you let me know. Consider it a down payment on making things right. He put his hat back on, nodded respectfully to both of them, and left, closing the door gently behind him. Lily watched through the window as he mounted his horse and rode away into the snowy darkness, then turned back to Mukwuru. "Do you believe him?" she asked. "I believe he wants to believe what he said," Mukwuru replied. "Whether he can actually follow through, whether the community will let him, that remains to be seen, but it is more than we had yesterday, and sometimes that is enough." Lily nodded, moving to stoke the fire again. The cabin was warm now, walls holding heat effectively, proof of their labor. She thought about all the work that had gone into this place, the sweat and blood, the setbacks and small victories, and she realized that building the cabin had been preparation for something larger, for building a life, a relationship, a future that would require the same persistence, the same willingness to keep going, even when the work seemed impossible. "I'm afraid," she admitted quietly, standing with her back to him, staring into the flames, afraid that this feeling, this certainty, will fade when reality sets in, when the difficulties mount, when we face the inevitable challenges that come with choosing each other. She heard Mukwuru stand, felt him move behind her, his arms coming around her waist, careful of his injury but steady and sure. "Fear is not weakness," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "Fear means you understand what you stand to lose, that you value what we are building enough to be afraid of losing it. I am afraid too, afraid of failing you, of not being enough, of bringing you pain instead of joy. But I choose to act despite the fear, to build despite knowing it might fall, to love despite knowing I might lose. That is all courage is, doing what matters even when you are terrified." Lily turned in his arms, looking up at him. This man who had appeared from nowhere and changed everything. "Teach me to be that brave," she whispered. "You already are," he said. "You just need to keep choosing it. Every day, every moment, one decision at a time." He kissed her then, soft and gentle, a promise rather than a demand. And Lily felt something settle in her chest, something that had been restless and uncertain for so long, finally finding peace. This was right. She knew it with the same certainty she had known anything in her life. This man, this love, this choice to build something new from the ashes of what had been lost. They stood there as the fire burned low, as the snow accumulated outside, as the cabin held them safe and warm. Eventually they separated, practical needs reasserting themselves. Lily prepared a simple meal from their meager supplies, while Mukwuru, despite her protests, insisted on checking the door and windows one final time, making sure they were secure against the storm. They ate in companionable silence, shoulders touching at the small table, neither needing words to communicate what mattered. After, Lily laid out bedrolls near the fire, close together, and they lay down fully clothed. Propriety and practicality, both dictating caution even as their hearts urged something else. "Tomorrow," Mukwuru said, staring up at the ceiling beams they had installed together. "We finish the last repairs. Make this place truly whole. Tomorrow," Lily agreed. "And the day after, and the day after that. We keep building, keep choosing this, keep proving that love can exist even in a world that tries to forbid it. One log at a time," Mukwuru said, echoing the phrase that had become their shared philosophy. "One log at a time," Lily repeated, reaching for his hand in the darkness, finding it waiting. Outside, the wind howled and the snow fell thick and heavy, blanketing the Texas hills in white, erasing tracks, covering scars, offering the clean slate that only winter could provide. Inside the cabin, two people who had lost everything and found each other slept, their hands joined, their breathing synchronized, their hearts beating a rhythm that spoke of survival and hope, and the stubborn refusal to let the world break what they had chosen to build. The cabin stood solid around them, walls that had been broken now made whole, roof that had collapsed now holding strong, a home rebuilt, not just with timber and nails, but with trust and courage and the kind of love that refused to apologize for its existence. It was not perfect, nothing ever was. Gaps remained. Repairs were still needed. Challenges would come with the dawn. But it was theirs, built by their hands, warmed by their presence, sustained by their choice to stand together against everything that tried to push them apart. And in the end, that was what mattered. Not perfection, but persistence. Not ease, but effort. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. As Lily drifted towards sleep, she thought of Daniel, of the life they had tried to build, of the dreams that had died with him. She thought of the woman she had been when he was alive, dependent and uncertain, always seeking his approval, his guidance, his strength. And she thought of the woman she had become, forged in loss and loneliness, tempered by struggle, made strong through necessity. She was not the same person anymore, could never be that person again, and she found she did not want to be. The woman she had become was harder, yes, scarred and wary and slow to trust, but she was also stronger, more capable, more certain of her own worth. She had learned that she could survive alone, that she did not need someone else to complete her, and that, paradoxically, was what made her choice to be with Mukwuru so powerful, because it was truly a choice. Not born from desperation or necessity, but from genuine desire, from recognition of an equal partner, from respect and affection, and the kind of love that did not demand completion, but celebrated wholeness. Mukwuru shifted beside her, his arm tightening around her waist even in sleep, and Lily smiled into the darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. She knew that with certainty the town would test them, society would judge them, the law might even try to separate them. There would be hardships ahead that she could not yet imagine, obstacles that would require every ounce of strength they possessed. But they would face those challenges together. Two people who had been broken and had learned to rebuild. Two survivors who refused to let survival be the only victory. Two hearts that had chosen to risk everything for the possibility of something more. The fire crackled low, burning down to embers that glowed like small promises in the darkness. The wind outside had calmed, the storm moving on, leaving behind a world transformed by white. And inside the cabin on the edge of the Texas wilderness, two people slept, their future uncertain, but their commitment absolute. The path unclear, but their direction chosen. They had built a home from ruins, had forged love from loss, had proven that even in the hardest soil, with the most unlikely circumstances, with all the forces of the world aligned against them, it was possible to create something beautiful, something lasting, something worth fighting for. One log at a time, one choice at a time, one moment at a time, they would build their life together. And nothing, not prejudice, not law, not fear itself, would tear down what they had chosen to create. Spring came to the Texas hill country with an explosion of wildflowers, bluebonnets carpeting the hills in waves of color that stretched to the horizon. The cabin that Lillian Voss and Mukwuru had rebuilt together no longer looked like a structure born from destruction, but rather like something that had always belonged to the land, weathered and solid, surrounded by a thriving garden and a newly built barn that housed 2 horses, a milk cow and a dozen chickens. Lily stood in the garden, her hands dark with soil, pulling weeds from between rows of beans and squash. Her hair, now streaked with premature grey at the temples, was pulled back in a practical braid. Her dress was simple but well made, sewn from fabric she had traded eggs and preserves for in Cedar Bluff. Her hands were calloused and strong, the hands of a woman who had learned that survival required more than hope. It required work. Behind her, the sound of an axe biting into wood rang out in steady rhythm. Mukwuru was splitting logs for the winter supply, working shirtless in the warm spring sun. The scar on his ribs from the Fletcher gang shootout now faded to a thin white line. His hair had grown longer, reaching past his shoulders, and he wore it loose today, occasionally pausing to tie it back when it fell across his face. 2 years had passed since the day they had declared their intentions to build a life together, and those years had tested them in ways neither could have anticipated. The town of Cedar Bluff had slowly, grudgingly begun to accept their presence, though acceptance was perhaps too strong a word. Tolerance might be more accurate, a wary acknowledgement that they were not leaving, were not going to be driven away by whispers or social exclusion. Samuel Hartwick had kept his word, standing with them when others had tried to make trouble, vouching for them when merchants had refused service, speaking up in church when the preacher had delivered sermons about the sanctity of racial boundaries. It had cost him friendships, had strained relationships within his own family, but he had persisted, perhaps seeking redemption for his earlier failures. Others had followed his example, slowly, cautiously, but genuinely. Martha Jenkins at the general store now greeted them civilly, even warmly on good days. The blacksmith, a man named Thomas Reed, had become something close to a friend, trading metalwork for vegetables and meat. Emma Caldwell, now 16 and living with a family in town, visited the cabin regularly, bringing news and staying for meals, calling Lily her aunt and Mukwuru her uncle with fierce pride. But there were still those who would never accept them, who crossed the street when they saw them coming, who muttered prayers for their souls and predictions of divine judgment. Clara Whitmore had organized a petition to have them removed from the territory, though it had gained little traction. A few young men, emboldened by whiskey and stupidity, had ridden out to the cabin one night 6 months ago, intent on causing trouble. But Mukwuru had met them at the property line with his rifle and a calm explanation of what would happen if they took one more step forward. They had not returned. Through it all, Lily and Mukwuru had simply continued living, working their land, supporting each other, building something that transcended the categories others tried to impose on them. They had married in a Comanche ceremony, witnessed by members of Mukwuru's band who had traveled south specifically for the occasion. There had been no legal recognition, no white preacher, no certificate filed with the territory, but they had spoken vows to each other under an open sky, had exchanged gifts, had been blessed by an elder who had known Pahayoko, and that was enough. Lily straightened from her weeding, pressing one hand to the small of her back, and felt the distinctive flutter in her belly that had become familiar over the past few months. She was 4 months along, showing just enough that her dresses no longer fit properly, though she had not yet told anyone in town. The knowledge was precious, private, shared only between her and Mukwuru and the few friends they trusted completely. She heard his footsteps behind her, felt his presence before his arms came around her waist, his hands settling over the small swell of her stomach. "How is our daughter today?" he asked, his voice warm against her ear. "Our son, you mean," Lily corrected with a smile, "is active, demanding, already showing his father's stubbornness. Shiki, a daughter with her mother's courage," Mukwuru countered. "It would be a blessing to this world." They had played this game for weeks now, gently arguing over the baby's gender, both knowing it did not matter, both simply enjoying the normalcy of the debate. Lily leaned back against him, marveling at how natural this felt, how right, despite everything the world said it should not be. "Are you afraid?" she asked quietly, voicing the worry that had been growing alongside the child, of what this means, of bringing a child into a world that will not know how to see them, that will try to force them into boxes they do not fit. Mukwuru was silent for a moment, his hands gentle but firm on her stomach. "Every parent is afraid," he said finally, "afraid of failing their children, of not protecting them from the hardness of the world, but we will teach them to be strong, to be proud of who they are, to stand in the space between worlds and claim it as their own. They will face challenges we cannot prevent, but they will also have something precious. They will have love. They will have two people's wisdom, two cultures' strength, and they will know, always, that they were wanted, were chosen, were celebrated." Lily turned in his arms, looking up at him, this man who had saved her in so many ways, who had shown her that beginning again was possible, that love could survive and even thrive in the harshest conditions. "I love you," she said. Simple words that carried the weight of everything they had endured together. "I love you," Mukwuru replied, "and I love the life we have built. One log at a time, one choice at a time, one day at a time." They stood there in the garden, surrounded by new growth, holding each other as the sun climbed higher, warming the earth, promising another season of struggle and survival and small victories. The cabin behind them stood solid, a testament to what could be built when two people refused to let the world dictate their possibilities. And inside Lily, their child grew, the next chapter of a story that was being written one moment at a time, defying expectations, proving that love needed no permission, only courage. The future remained uncertain, as it always would, but they would face it together. Two people who had learned that the strongest foundations were built not from perfection, but from persistence. Not from ease, but from the willingness to keep building even when the work seemed impossible. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.